Hi, my name is Marianne, and today we will be diving into the study and practice of phrenology. Now, I'm going to begin by giving a simple enough definition of the practice and a little bit of background info. To define phrenology, the all knowing Google refers to it as the detailed study of the shape and size of the cranium, which supposedly acts as an indication of a person's character and mental capabilities. Well, seems pretty straightforward, right? In theory, this study was meant to be a way to easily provide concrete reasoning behind why a person behaved the way they did, why they felt the way they did, or why they were in the societal position they were in. At least that's what founder Franz Joseph Gall insisted was the study's function. He created this quote unquote science in the late 18th century, but it soon grew to new heights during the mid 19th century and was even popular enough to have its own devoted audience across Europe and the Americas. Phrenology was based on the belief that human behavior originated in the brain. This was a frame of thought that moved away from earlier beliefs, which initially focused on the four humors as the source of emotions and behaviors. Although Gall's new science was shrouded in skepticism by quite a significant amount of people, the emergence of his idea showed that a major step was being taken in the development of the scientific study of behavior. And despite the lack of support from certain academic groups, Gall's pseudoscience continued to climb in popularity. Gall not only believed that the shape of the skull held clues to a person's predispositions, but also that each area of the brain was linked to a different characteristic. It was soon concluded by Gall and his protege, Johann Spurzheim, that there are about 30 higher functions or faculties present in the mind of people, which could be determined by the shape and size of the skull. Some of these faculties that Gall identified include combativeness or anger, benevolence, destructiveness, etc. One example of how this worked was through American elections, where citizens would often rely on phrenologists to help them decide who to vote for. It was believed that Lincoln's faculties were form, order, individuality, and eventuality, which is factual memory. And all this supposedly meant he was a very practical person. One quote also described him saying, "He has large benevolence, large conscientiousness, and large hope. His veneration is full, and his spirituality average." In essence, he was seen as a person who had good moral characteristics and a propensity to doing the right thing. All of these things would inevitably have likely influenced whether people voted for him or not. Although early phrenologists were taking a step in the right direction by realizing that different parts of the brain have different functions, unfortunately they didn't quite get what the actual functions were and how the brain itself worked. Operating on the assumption that the brain is the organ of the mind and that the skull crystallizes around the brain during infancy, phrenologists set about measuring the bumps in people's skulls in order to assess their mental traits. Like I previously mentioned, it was believed that the faculties found in particular areas of the skull were what determined a person's character and personality. And the research, using that word very loosely by the way, carried out by phrenologists eventually led them to leaping to wild conclusions about certain groups of people. This, of course, allowed them a means through which they could explain and justify the way in which the world operated, a world that was hierarchical in nature and made a constant effort to distinguish the weak from the elite. Many aspired to use the pseudoscience as a way to map and ascribe all of humanity to specific categories on the basis of skull types.
You see, the science of phrenology is crucial to understanding the separation of our two species. In the skull of the African here, the area associated with submissiveness is larger than any human or any other subhuman species on planet Earth.
It was essentially used to reinforce the classifications of 19th century race science, which argued that humans were divided by inherent and innate differences, and that the positions in society the individuals inhabited were a result of the traits and attitudes which are supposedly intrinsic to their nature, not by the systems that were in place. Certain phrenologists, like Charles Caldwell from Kentucky, claimed that African skulls had large sections which supposedly corresponded to veneration and cautiousness, and as a result, made them inherently submissible and tameable and justified why they could be enslaved. Phrenologists didn't only stop at theories about race. Oh no. They also extended the grapevine of their pseudoscience into explaining inherent criminality and supposedly identified that criminals had large regions of their skulls which corresponded with acquisitiveness or excessive desire for more than one needs or deserves. Once again, this science refused to limit itself as it also dabbled in some light sexism as well. I mean, you might as well do all three, right? Many phrenologists argued that male skulls were more developed and better suited for intellectual pursuits, while women's were better developed for childcare. Gall himself claimed that women's skulls somehow proved that they had inferior organization skills and were prone to superstition. Many of these unfounded beliefs inevitably led to phrenology being discredited as a science.
Phrenology, which is the study of the human head. Feeling here, I can tell that Antoinette is of Dutch descent.
No, I'm Prussian.
Phrenology was never a proper science to begin with, and despite some of its positive contributions to how we view the mind and its effects on behavior today, many of its core tenets were simply arbitrary guesses and ungrounded assumptions. By the end of the 1840s, there was a growing amount of evidence against phrenology, and it began to be widely considered as being on the same level as astrology or even palmistry.